Hi there. Thanks for joining, everybody. We'll just wait a few more minutes. Can you hear me? Hi, and welcome to you all. We'll give everyone one more minute before we kick off. Thanks for joining us during this lunchtime session, our first lunchtime session. Okay, we might as well start getting going. So thank you all for joining. Welcome to the UX Design in SaaS meetup. Thanks for joining our first ever lunchtime session. Today's topic is on building a winning UX strategy using the Kano model. This talk was given by the legend himself, Jared Spool, and we will rewatch it now, and he will join us afterwards at 12 p.m. for a live Q&A session. So very excited about this today. Big shout out to Tong Van Trung, who is a member of this meetup group, who made this talk and live Q&A session happen today in the first place. Thanks to him and Jared. Quick mention of who I am. My name is Clodagh Lynch. I work at Whisper, which is a SaaS company. And the reason I started this group is so that like-minded people from different industries can get together and discuss issues we are having and solutions and techniques or frameworks that we're using to help improve our SaaS products. Our sponsors today are Whisper, whose Zoom account we're using. Thank you, and heads up to everyone, this session is going to be recorded as well. So afterwards, you'll be able to access this from the meetup page. Whisper is currently offering a 14-day free trial for its workflow platform, if any of you would like to sign up and have a look. So most importantly, who is our speaker, Jared Spool? Jared Spool is a maker of awesomeness at the Center, UIE. Center is a school he started with Leslie Jensen-Inman to create industry-ready user experience designers. UIE is Centre's professional development arm, dedicated to understanding what it takes for organizations to produce competitively great products and services. In the 43 years he's been in the tech field, he's worked with hundreds of organizations. He's written 2 books, published hundreds of articles and podcasts, and tours the world speaking to audiences everywhere. So let's get down to business. Before we hit play on this presentation together, if you have any questions as you watch Jared presenting, please pencil them down into the Slido app. If I could ask you all now to click on the link I'm going to put in the chat and open the Slido app. Let me put this in the chat. To everyone. There, you should have the link now. If you click on this and open this window and have it beside you as the talk is going on, so that you can pencil down any questions that come to mind while you're listening to the talk. Don't be shy, please pencil down any questions that you think of as the talk is going on, so you don't forget them afterwards while we have Jared live. So let's get started. Sit back and relax, listening to Jared's talk on building a winning UX strategy using the Kano model. I will hit play. Just let me know if you guys can hear this. Someone could give me a thumbs up.
The CEO of Hyatt Hotels, facing lagging revenues and dropping customer satisfaction scores, decided that he wanted to do something that no one in the hotel industry had ever done before. He was going to give away free stuff. And what he was going to give away were things like in-room massages and picking up people's bar tabs. And he was going to have all of his employees just do this completely at random when customers least expected it. He called it random acts of generosity. The idea was that if customers suddenly received some gift, they would forget about all the things that were making their stay miserable. It didn't work. He thought that if he were to give out these amazingly awesome free delighters, he called them, that the things that were frustrating his customers, like broken air conditioning or hot water not working in the showers, or the banquet staff the banquet staff serving frozen serving pies. I'm from America, we speak English. The banquet staff serving frozen pies, and just a grumpy guest services staff that never seemed to want the guests to be in the hotel, that somehow would disappear. Now, it seems obvious in retrospect that this wouldn't work, but more interesting, we can predict why. There are tools at our disposal that help us see what happens when someone uses our product. One of the ones that I happen to love is called the Customer Journey Map. Customer Journey Map is very simple to make. First thing you do is you just list out all the things that your customer is going to do in the process of using your product or service. Then, as a timeline, you basically measure how it goes from extreme frustration to extreme delight. And you see what happens. For example, in this case where our customer is trying to book a hotel online, we can see that searching for the hotel worked really well, but once we got to the property, actually figuring out which room we wanted to stay in was not very good because the descriptions didn't seem to tell you anything useful. Once we started booking, things got better, but then getting into billing and payment information, that was frustrating because it kept asking me to take spaces out of phone numbers and where that silly security code was, and there were all sorts of things that I kept getting errors for. And suddenly, we work through this and we're done. That's it. And suddenly we can tell what is working well and what isn't. And if we do this once, twice, a dozen times, 100 times, we suddenly have a way of measuring what is frustrating and what has delighted our customers. And if we take this a step further, we can look a little deeper. We can see what's going on here. You can think of any experience as one that goes from the range of being frustrating to being delightful. And we want delight. I don't know any team who sets out to frustrate their customers. Nobody says, you know what would be awesome? If we just made them a little bit more frustrated than they were. Well, maybe the airlines do that, but nobody else seems to want to do that. So this is the path. We want to bring our scores up. But it turns out that the way we do that changes because of the middle. The middle is this idea of something being usable, something being just sort of neutrally okay. It's neither frustrating nor delightful. And it's an important point to pay attention to, because the things we do to get to the middle are different than the things we do to get away from the middle. To get to that usable point, really, the rule is stop sucking so much. But to get to the delightful part, we invert that and we say, start being delightful. And that difference is really important, It turns out that being not sucky is an act of removal. You take things away. It's similar to how Michelangelo deals with sculpture, right? Carving out the stuff that he doesn't want. Whereas delight is an additive activity. We add to make something delightful. So we actually have to understand this difference between getting to that neutral point of usable, because our whole process has to change once we get there. And everything we were doing that got us the success to that point will stop working to get us further. So when we think of strategy, we think of, okay, if we're going to have some sort of user experience strategy for our product, what does that mean? Well, it's simply just that process of getting things from frustration to delight. That's really its simplest form. But the way that we do that turns out to be not as simple. Fortunately, we have a guide through this. And it's a Japanese economist named Noriaki Kano. And Kano was smart enough to ask a simple question. What's the amount of investment that an organization has to make to truly delight their customers? And he started to plot out what companies had done, and he created this interesting model of how businesses work. And the model uses our friendly scale here from extreme frustration to extreme delight. And it compares that to investment, from low investment to high investment. Now, when he started to map out what made companies successful, he saw three basic patterns. The first one he called the performance payoff. This is just the creation of features. So if we're building a hotel, putting in a restaurant, putting in a pool, putting in air conditioning, these are the things that are features that basically add to the experience of the hotel. Make more investment, then you get payoff. But he also found two other interesting patterns that were as equal, if not more important than the payoff, the performance payoff. And the first one he called basic expectations. Basic expectations are the things that you bring that you expect the product to do for you. In my hotel room, there's a water closet. It's got a sink, a toilet, a shower. Nowhere in the hotel brochure did it mention this. They didn't have to give it to me. They never promised it to me. Yet I showed up, and had it not been there, I would have not been a happy guest at that hotel. That's a basic expectation. We expect certain things to just happen, even though the company never promised it to be there. The other curve that Kano said we needed to pay attention to was what he called excitement generators. And excitement generators tell us what will delight our customers, often with not very much of an investment. Just teaching the hotel staff to smile would make Hyatt's much better to stay at. It doesn't cost a lot to do that. So we can do this, and this is where this notion of delighters in products come from, is through these excitement generators. It turns out there's a lot of richness in this chart that Kano gave us. So let's take it a step further and look a little deeper. And let's start with the performance payoff. Now, when Apple comes out with a new version of their operating system, they talk about features. And it's not what the features are per se, it's just how many there are. And they try to get the biggest number they can. And of course, we're all excited. We line up at 4 a.m. to get copies of this thing so that we can find out what the new features of text edit are going to be. Because that's what we've been waiting for. And this is what companies do. You know, a startup comes out with their first product, and what do? They put 3 features in it because, frankly, that's the only resources they have, so they can get these 3 features built. And because they've thought real hard about it for a long time, they've built amazing features, and everybody loves it, and it's great. And then maybe there's 2 more features that they couldn't get into that first release before they ran out of money, so they put that into the 1.5 release. And then people love the thing, and they say, okay, you know what? It'd be awesome if you had more features. So that's when version 2.0 comes out, and they add a few more. And now people are suggesting features and coming up with even more things that they'd like to see in the product. And features are coming in, and now suddenly big companies are paying attention. They're like, you know, we'll buy 10,000 seats if you add a whole bunch of features here. So sure enough, we add a whole bunch of features here. And finally, we get to this point where someone's putting big bags of money on the table, and they're basically saying, you know, we will buy thousands and thousands of seats if you put this one feature that we know no one else will use, but we will use it into your product. And bam, here we are. Feature hell. This is the sad life of the product manager. Yes, feature, 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 and feature. It's like listening to Donald Trump talk about China. You've heard of him. I don't know if you've been paying to the American elections, but the entire Republican Party, central casting has done a fantastic job this year. It's just been awesome. So this is the thing, right? Now we've got this product that takes forever to do anything with. It's hard to learn, it's hard to use, it's hard to maintain. Just making small changes takes forever because there are so many options and configuration changes. We have to change with every possible combination. And then there's the billing engine. Nobody will touch the billing engine, right? The last person who worked on the billing engine ran out of the building naked. Welcome to experience rot. Experience rot is what happens when we add so many features that we have created this massive amount of complexity, and we have completely destroyed the user's experience. It happens with every product. But it turns out that there is something we can do about this, something that's under our control. The smart organizations, this is where they often really rally around this idea of creating a user experience team and doing user experience research. And what they do when they do the user experience research is they send people out into the field to study what the product is being used as. And what they learn is that hardly anybody is using any more than just a handful of important features. Nobody's using the other features. So just knowing that helps you quite a bit because you can organize the product around those features, but you can do even more. And the really smart companies do this. What they do is they come out with a whole new version of the product, a new release that only has those features. And they carefully design those features so they all seamlessly work together and they all fit together, and the underlying architecture is such that they're easy to maintain and easy to enhance, and the whole thing is done well. This is how you get past experience rot. Though often, whenever I'm talking about this, someone will come up to me and say, you know, that's really awesome, except at our company, that could never happen. At our company, we have an unwritten law that once a feature goes in, it has to stay there until we all die. Features can never come out. So there's no way our company will do this. And I look them straight in the eye and I say, I have no problem with this. You don't have to do this. Because if you don't do this, your competitor will. This is how we make new startups, right? Every startup is because there's some major player in the marketplace who has experience rot and has created something awful. So you don't have to do this. You don't have to be the startup. You don't have to own the market from that point on. It's okay with me. I still sleep well. There's another way to prevent this, but you have to start much earlier than release 6. It's a two-letter methodology. It's called no. No, we're not going to put that feature in. No, that's not going to happen. We're going to keep the design clean and useful. We're only going to add things that actually help the user's experience, that actually solve a problem for the customer. That's what we're going to focus on. This is the real job of the product manager. And this is what has to happen to make sure that products are well designed. And that's basically how we deal with the performance payoff. But that's not the only thing we have to deal with. Kano pointed out that probably the most complicated thing was dealing with basic expectations. Basic expectations are things you don't get to decide. They are things the customer brings with them. I'm staying in a hotel. We're up on the 7th floor. When I turn on the shower, I expect the water to be hot like that. I don't know where that expectation comes from. It definitely doesn't come from my one-story house where I turn on the hot water in the shower and it takes 3 minutes for it to get hot. So it's not because this is what I live with at home, but I've had this expectation that water should be hot instantly. This is a crazy expectation, particularly on tall hotels, right? Imagine what it's like to get the water up into the 32nd floor of a hotel and have it be hot all the time. How does that work? I bet you don't know how that works. It actually is pretty cool. You see, the way the hotel does it is they have heaters all along the circulation system, and they constantly circulate the hot water through the hotel at tremendous expense to you, the guest. They are constantly making sure that hot water is never more than a few inches away from the tap of the shower. They don't tell you this, they just do it because of this expectation that they didn't get to set. And if they don't meet that expectation, you are an unhappy customer. This is a map of a township in Ireland called Airfield. And one of the fascinating things about this little township of Ireland is that within its borders, it does not contain an airfield. At least not until iOS 6 maps came out. iOS 6 maps, somebody decided that it must have been a mistake that Airfield, Ireland did not have the airfield symbol, so they gave it that. And everybody in the UK and elsewhere was completely amused by this. Well, everybody except for the UK Civil Aviation Authority, who did not find this amusing in the bit. They actually were quite petrified of this because they imagined some poor pilot having some sort of emergency, needing to make an immediate landing, reaching into their pocket and pulling out their iOS device, looking up the nearest airfield, and being told there's a safe landing in Airfield, Ireland, where there is not. Now, here's the thing about iOS 6 maps. Technically, it was one of the best mapping platforms to ever hit society. The underlying technology was amazing. Just one example of many is that it's the first mapping system to be fully accessible to people who are blind. It has complete audio cues for everything on the map. When it gives you directional guidance, it actually makes a tone in the background that lets you know that you've gone off the path, or the bus you're sitting on has taken a turn it shouldn't have taken, so that you can do something about it. It's completely amazing in many different ways, except for a couple little problems. Like the post-apocalyptic view of Manhattan, the flattening of the Eiffel Tower, the redestruction of the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, the dipping of the Hoover Dam, and my personal favorite, the discovery of the long-lost castle of the Burger King. Now, the thing is that the technology worked great, but the data did not. The data was the problem here. And the thing that you go to for a map app is the data. You would prefer not to find your house listed as being in the river, just alongside it, where it actually is. And so it turns out that that's a basic expectation that apparently Apple didn't know. It's hard to get these things right, and it's easy to miss basic expectations. And that's the thing. If Apple had gotten the data completely right, nobody would have talked about it. You would get neutral satisfaction. Nobody talks about things that are neutrally satisfying. They talk about things that are delightful, and they talk about things that are frustrating, but they don't talk about things in the middle. Yet, if you spend all the money you're going to spend on basic expectations, the best you will ever do is neutral satisfaction. That's it. Because it's an expectation. We just expect this to work. We expect the toilet to flush. When the toilet doesn't flush, we tell people. When it does, we don't talk about it. I got to tell you about this toilet. You only had to press it once. That's an American thing. So the only thing we can do with basic expectations is get them wrong. Right? That's the problem we have. They cost a lot, and we can only screw it up. This is what makes our jobs difficult, because we have to constantly be ensuring we have met expectations that our competitors set, that other industries have set, that we had no say in. So we constantly have to work at ensuring that we are making basic expectations. But let's talk about excitement generators. I want to go back to that customer journey map, because the customer journey map gives us a picture of what things are like today. But what we can do with this map is we can ask a really interesting question. What would that same customer's experience be if we made the entire thing delightful? What is that experience like? Well, that's what excitement generators are for. And to talk about excitement generators, the way I like to do it is to use a model that a speaker who will be on stage later, Dana Chisnell, is going to use, invented. And Dana's model basically breaks things into 3 different areas. What she calls pleasure, flow, and meaning. And these three areas make up the different ways we can approach getting delight to our customers. So let's start with pleasure. There were these two professors from the University of Michigan who created a project they called the Significant Objects Project. And what they did was they went to eBay and they would buy pieces of junk, little statues and other sort of kachka that was all about sort of these things that people would have in their homes for no reason whatsoever. And they wouldn't pay a whole lot of money for these things. They would just pay pennies for them. But then what they would do is they would give these things to people who were working on the project, all of whom were writers. And they would ask the writers to write a story telling the history of this object and why it was important to the owner. And so these guys would fictionally create these stories that would make up why this figurine was a good luck charm for somebody and how it had been passed down for generations. And now the last generation doesn't need it anymore and they're selling it on eBay and maybe someone else can get good luck from it. They would take the story and the little piece of junk that they bought and they'd put them back up on eBay together and see what would happen. And what would happen is people would buy it. This one sold for $193.50. Now, the only difference between the original statue and what they put back on eBay was the story that gave it the value. A value of $190.50. The writer didn't even get paid that much. Now, at first, this seems like an interesting experiment, but we've seen this repeat itself over and over again. We do a lot of studies of people shopping on e-commerce sites, and we were watching people shop for cameras that they wanted to buy on Walmart.com. And what we noticed about Walmart.com is when people would try and figure out which camera was best for them, they'd end up on the product description page. And the product description page was basically content that Walmart.com's buyers had copied and pasted onto the description page. What they didn't do was add any value there. They just took what the manufacturers gave them. And so the problem was that if you looked at one camera versus another, it was very hard for the customer to figure out what the differences were because every product description page was in a different format with different terms, with different elements. This was obviously done for the expediency of getting the product up, but not necessarily for helping the shopping experience. And pretty much every electronics vendor that we studied, they did this same thing. They would just copy and paste what the manufacturers gave them. After all, the manufacturers know their product better than anybody. Why wouldn't we do that? Every company did this except one, a company called Crutchfield. Crutchfield didn't use the manufacturer's descriptions. Instead, what they did is they would give the products to their very passionate customer support people and ask them to give the thing a thorough run through. Those support people in turn would then make videos. They would create large databases that would allow you to compare one product to another. And they would write extensive product research reports that would give all sorts of details about the product just at a level of depth that nobody else does. For instance, they would list out everything that comes in the box, including the USB warning note. Now, when we would watch customers finally buy their cameras, we noticed something fascinating. Every customer had a budget. The budget was always set to be slightly higher than the camera they were hoping to buy. So what we would find on sites like Walmart is that the customers would spend about 89% of their budget, exactly what we predicted they would spend when they were shopping. But on Crutchfield, the average customer spent 237% of their budget. They would not only spend the 100% that we gave them, they would add 137% of their own money to finish the product purchase process. The only difference between Crutchfield and Walmart was the story. And when we talk to customers, the word they used to describe the difference in the shopping experience was pleasure. It was way more pleasurable to shop on Crutchfield. Now, what was fascinating about this is that there wasn't anything in Crutchfield's design that would indicate it was a happier place. There wasn't anything that was smiley or fancy happy talk or any of that stuff. It was all business. It just was the business the customer wanted. And since the customer was making an expensive purchase and they needed confidence, this was pleasurable. So pleasure doesn't take a lot of effort. It's a small investment. And it doesn't have to be putting dancing gerbils on the site. It can be just doing a good job. What about flow? Well, in the United States, there's an insurance company called Progressive, and it turns out that their mascot is a woman named Flo. But that's actually not what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is how Progressive actually completely changed the online insurance industry. Turns out before the Progressive launched their site, the average insurance quote online would take 20 minutes, and 80% of the time you would find out you were declined. Most of the time you were declined because they did not sell insurance in your state. It would take 20 minutes to get to that point. Now, Progressive decided to change the way insurance quotes were done online. So the first thing they did was they asked you what your zip code was. That immediately told them whether you were in their service area or not. Turns out now they sell service-wide, so you're always in their service area. Then the next thing they did was they would ask you for your name and your address and your birth date. And that's it. And this is a very different structure than the multi-page forms that the previous insurance companies were using. This is all they asked, because from this data, they could then go and look up in the registry of motor vehicles what your owned cars were, ask you which of those you want to insure, get other information from you about who's going to be driving those cars. They could deduce from the database what the safety information was, so they didn't have to ask you about that. They could deduce a whole bunch of things except for things like mileage. And finally, they would then give you a quote. They reduced it from 20 minutes down to under 3 minutes with a quote that was competitive. Now they've gone even further. Not only do they give you a quote for their product, they give you a quote for their competitors' products too, right on the screen. And sometimes the competitive products cost less than theirs. But because they managed to reduce the number of screens from about 40 down to 6, and the time from 20 minutes down to 3, they are actually now selling more insurance even when the competitors have cheaper prices. So this is how they were able to get delight from flow. Flow is removing all the things out of the process, all the things that computers can do out, so that the user can do what they need to do. The hardest thing for delight is meaning. In the States, we have a company called Zipcar. Zipcar parks cars in cities so you don't have to own one. And you basically rent them by the hour, and you do the whole transaction online. And that by itself is pretty delightful. But what makes it even more delightful is that because the cars are all parked in your neighborhood, they regularly get people together in the neighborhood for little parties. And on the badges for those parties, they put your name and the name of the car you always rent. Turns out every car has a unique name, like Mustafa. And they have the badges say what cars are the ones you like to rent. So you can go around the party and meet your neighbors who you may have never met before, but you share something in common, which is you all rent the same car, which is actually an important thing to know, because next time you're thinking about leaving it a little dirtier or not filling up the gas the way you should, you will remember that party and who you met. But they do even more than this, in that they do little programs like on election day, they will let you rent the car at a discount if you promise to take people who can't get to the polling place to the polling place. Or they will on Thanksgiving let you rent the car if you promise to deliver turkeys to people who can't normally afford them, or on Christmas deliver gifts to families that can't afford those. And it's those acts that really help the customers find meaning in what it means to share a car with a community. And it's that notion of sharing the car with the community that the company really gets around their delight. That's what people talk about. Those are the stories they tell. The thing about Zipcar is it's authentic. And it turns out that authenticity is key. United Airlines would love me to believe that they actually care about me. And when they ran a bunch of commercials talking about how much they actually cared about the Olympic athletes that I might be following, the thinking was that I love the Olympics, they love the Olympics, we're all together on this. But here's the problem. I love the Olympics, they love the Olympics, they hate me. This is clear. They don't hold back on this. So I cannot get meaning from their little gesture with the Olympics. I'm sure it's awesome. I hope they don't do the same thing to the Olympic athletes that they did to me, which is make the Olympic athletes hate them too. Meaning is the hardest of the things to do. It takes the most investment. It takes a long time. But if you can pull it off, it has huge returns. So this is basically it. The thing is that you have to know that over time, things that are delighters today will become basic expectations tomorrow. It used to be that it was delightful to go to a hotel with Wi-Fi. Now, if the hotel doesn't have Wi-Fi, or if it doesn't work, or if it's not fast enough, we get pretty upset about it. They never promised any difference. That's our expectation that we're bringing. So you have to be prepared for basic expectations to change over time. That's the essence of excitement generators. If we go back to the customer journey map one more time, and we look at what the map is telling us, we can see that we have our current experience. We have the experience that we're aspiring to that's going to be all delightful. The gap between the current experience and that aspirational experience has a name. We call it innovation. Innovation is what gets us to our aspirational experience. In the United States, doing your annual taxes is a chore. It's particularly a chore for people who have probably not mastered a lot of math skills because of their education, or they have issues understanding the complexity of the process of what all these things mean in business. And they make mistakes on their tax form. Intuit came out with a product called SnapTax. SnapTax is very simple. You take your phone, you take a picture of the form that your employer gives you, known as your W-2 or your 1099. You snap a picture of that, it scans the document. Turns out everything that's needed to file your taxes is actually on that document. So it scans all the information off. It opens up an electronic filing docket. It pushes that information into the docket. If you happen to be one of the people who works at more than one employer, you take a picture of every single one of your W-2s. It compiles them into a single tax form. It shows you the outcomes. It does the math correctly. It says, would you like to file? If so, here's the refund you're going to get. We'll file it today. You'll have your refund in 2 weeks. You want to do that? Yes. Filing your taxes becomes a less than 15-minute chore. That's delightful. That's innovative. But here's the thing about innovation. Innovation is a word that we use all the time. And frankly, I don't think it means what we think it means. People think that innovation is about inventing something. Intuit didn't invent anything. They didn't invent taking pictures. They didn't invent using a camera phone. They didn't invent scanning documents. They didn't invent filling out forms. They didn't invent electronic filing. They invented nothing. And yet it's still innovative. It's innovative because they added value. We don't need to invent anything. We just need to add value where it didn't exist before. Which brings me to the roadmap. Martin promised we were going to talk about roadmaps. You're a product manager. You probably always talk about roadmaps. The roadmap, for those of you who haven't experienced this joy, is a detailed description of what we're going to do over the next few releases. It talks about all the features that we're going to add to the next few releases, some of which may not happen for months or years, but yet we still have to commit to all the features. Feature, 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 feature. That's the roadmap. And we have to get more and more features so we can have more and more stuff with every release. And I thought this was the way it had to be until I talked to this guy. This is Bruce McCarthy. He's sort of a product manager's product manager. He's a really sharp dude. He's been doing this for a long time. And he has an idea he calls themes. And themes, the basic essence of themes is you take out the features and you place them on the roadmap with the actual problems you're going to solve for your customer. So instead of having a list of features, we have a description of customer problems that we are committing to solve. Now, his big contention is the basic benefit from this is that you no longer have to commit to some sort of technological solution that 3 years from now may be completely inappropriate. And that's great. But frankly, that's not the big win. The big win comes from the fact that we have the entire organization basing its strategy on customers and their problems. You cannot start to fill this out until you've done some basic research as to who your customers are and what they do with the product. You can figure out what your competitors are doing better than you, but you can also figure out where they've completely missed the gap and there are problems out there that nobody's solving and you can go for it. The beauty of this is that we're not talking about solutions. And one of the things we've known for a long time is that the best designers don't fall in love with their solutions. The best designers fall in love with the problem. And the beauty of focusing on customer problems is that we are focused on falling in love with the problem. And this turns out to work perfectly with the journey map, because where are the problems? They're really easy to find. They're right there at the bottom of the journey map. And when we look at what Kano's model told us, we can see that there are problems that we can solve in every possible one of the tracks. So we are in a perfect place to solve the problems, to understand them, to focus on customers, to make sure that we're doing the right thing, and to get to the basic expectation problems, and to get to the problems that would delight. This makes a complete strategy. A strategy that is based on our customers' problems is in essence a strategy that's based on user experience. So this is your UX strategy. So that's what I came to talk to you about today. We need to cut out features to avoid experience rot. We need to make sure that we are constantly understanding the user's experience to be able to figure out what those missed basic expectations are. We can create delight by focusing on pleasure, flow, and meaning. Themes allow us to shift the conversation from features to actual customer problems. And finally, our roadmap can be centered around what users really need, not what we think we need to ship to make the checklist as big as possible. If you found this the least bit interesting, I write about this a tremendous amount on UIE.com. If you're in the design space and we're not connected on LinkedIn, please, by all means, connect to me on LinkedIn. I'd be more than happy to find out more about what you're doing and what you're up to and the challenges you face. And finally, you can follow me on the Twitters, where I tweet about design, design strategy, design education, and the amazing customer service energy in the airline industry. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for encouraging my debate.
Radio, I'll stop sharing here, and we have the man himself with us. How are you, Jared?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. That was an awesome talk with some fascinating points in there. And your point on Airfield in Dublin, when they put in the plane, I lived right beside there in college. So I thought that was, or in uni. So I thought that was quite funny, that story.
Yes. So it was funny to everybody except for the CAA, but yes.
yeah, it sounds kind of scary for them, all right. So I think there's a few questions flowing in here for you. Let me see. I think I'll unmute the people that are asking them. Who asked the second question? How to adapt the delight the customer thinking can be used in a government department setting? Anyone want to put their hand up for that question? I'll unmute you.
Yeah. Well, maybe they'll unmute, or if you probably have to set it so people can unmute. But I can go ahead and give it a shot. The idea, the question, I saw the question come up during the talk before I had a chance to talk about pleasure, flow, and meaning. The pleasure, I mean, we can think about it all in terms of those three contexts from a government department. Whether the government department is building systems for the government workers themselves or for the public, the answer is basically the same. Think about the things that create frustration, and if you think about frustration being caused by missed expectations, then the delighters are basically exceeding expectations and it sort of anticipating needs. So in a government setting, one of the things that we would look for is and I've worked in the federal government in the US, so I have a sense of this. But one of the things you look for first is, are there things that are frustrating that we can just remove the frustrations, right? And so clear language, anticipating edge conditions. These are things that you know, if your situation is in your mind not the norm, and the government makes it easy for you to get the service or to get approval or for applying for benefits or whatever it is that you're dealing with, or if you're an employee, being able to help that citizen or resident, constituent, given their situation, even if it's unusual. Those are things that would count for pleasure, right? Anything where the person on the receiving end would say, "Wow, that was better than I expected." And flow is basically a look at things that are friction in the process. So we want to look for places where there's friction, and if we remove the friction, then we get ourselves better flow. So those are two elements. And of course, meaning, the best way to think about meaning is something that is, by using this system, am I actually helping someone else have a more delightful experience? And so meaning could easily be, for a government worker, just being able to help someone who is who needs help, who is in a situation where the government could help if the systems worked right. And for the constituent, it could very well be actually doing something that helps somebody else, right? Helping a family member, being able to make somebody else's life better. That tends to be meaningful. So the elements of delight are very applicable in a government setting. We have to get over this notion that delight is purely some sort of, give me a cookie. It is very much a element of exceeding expectations, anticipating needs, removing friction, and providing an opportunity to make more than just my life better. Those are the things that bring delight.
Great stuff. I'm not sure who actually asked that question in the first place, so can't see. No one's
Yeah, that's okay.
But thanks for that, Jared. There's one more question here. When starting a business and a customer is willing to pay for a particular feature that they will use, which mightn't be too relevant to everyone else, what to do? And I actually asked this question because in one of the companies where I worked, there was a lot of feature creep, like basically to get money at the start of the business being built up. The company accepted any feature that a customer would pay for, and next minute they had 5,000 features.
Right. So this is a phenomena that we all fall into the trap of sort of focusing on features. Customers come to us and they ask us for a feature because the language they know how to use is the language of a solution, right? When we go to the pharmacy and we walk in and we ask the pharmacist, we basically ask them almost always for something by name, right? We ask for, do you have something, a particular burn cream or something like that, and we don't basically talk about what the problem is, right? And the key thing is that we're in this space where we feel like if we're going to ask, we have to state out loud what the solution is. And the person in the store doesn't say, well, wait a second, what are you trying to do? What's the problem that you're trying to solve? And so that's the issue. And so what happens is customers come to us and they have this solution in mind. I will give you a big bag of money if you implement data export, right? So data export is now there. But the problem with data export is it can mean lots of different things. And I don't really know what it is that they mean. And I don't know if the thing that they're trying to solve, the problem that they have, is in fact a problem that other people have. So what we need to do first is we need to say, okay, tell me why you need data export. What is it that you can't do today? Could you show me the way you do whatever it is today, and show me the exact instant where if you had data export, it would make your life so much better, right? So we can start there, we can get to that. Maybe that they'll show us is that they needed to do backups, or maybe they need data export because they want to make a copy of the database someplace else. We have a Melbourne office, but we're going to open a Sydney office, and I want to basically just copy what I'm doing. So I want to export the data and deal with it. And, if I'm going to make backups, I need a way to import, right? So just giving you data export is not going to be the complete solution if I don't give you data import. On the other hand, if the reason that you're doing this is to make a new instantiation of the database, do we need to export everything? Do you want all of Melbourne's data, or would you be happy with just the metadata structure, and then Sydney will come up, but it'll have an empty database because that's where you're going to put the customers in? Or maybe the reason they want data export is because they want to export it into they want to put the data into another app. There's some other app that does things that ours doesn't do. Well, what is it that it does? I mean, what's the app? Well, it's probably Excel, because it's always Excel. And so now the data export, they're loading it into Excel. Well, what are they doing within Excel? Well, they're making charts. We have charts. Why aren't you using our charts? I didn't know you had charts, right? Maybe that's the reason. Or maybe the charts aren't good enough. Maybe we don't have the right charts, right? So the way we would fix the problem is not to give them data export. The way we would fix the problem is to give them better charts. And so depending on what the solution they're asking for is actually solving, we would actually build something different. And so we need to know what that is, right? So basically, if I have 5 different ways that I could build data export, and 4 of them I know are wrong. I need to find out from you what yours is. So we have to find out from the customer what the feature is, and then we have to go find out, do other people need this feature? Other people have the same problem. And if nobody else has the same problem, we're probably going to create some debt, right? We're going to create some technical debt, because we're going to have this thing that only one customer uses that we're going to have to maintain forever. And is that an investment we want to make? Right? We can invest our money in lots of things. Is that the right investment? So that's sort of the approach that I would use to identify if this feature is the right feature. First, identify what problem it solves. Second, figure out if other people have that problem. And then third, decide if it's worth the investment from a debt perspective. If it's something lots of people use, the investment's going to pay off really well. If it's something hardly anybody will use, that's problematic. How's that sound?
That sounds fantastic. It really resonates with me, like finding out what the problem is first, because the customer may have one vision on how to fix it. And when you drill down, as you mentioned, it could be solved in totally different ways.
Exactly. So that's the key thing.
Exactly. The questions are rolling in here. So let's see. Next up, we have Tung. He's asking, how do you apply the idea of basic expectations to the significant challenge of getting people to wear masks during COVID? And I'll unmute him here.
Hey, Tung.
Hello. Hello, Jared. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you, sir.
Yeah, so
always good to see you.
I wanted to pull out a twister for you, because you're always telling us to wear masks at the end of your sessions for our safety. But I think it's important to try and understand how we sort of bring out and make visible these basic expectations in the context of, say, wearing a mask.
Yes, I think the problem around the mask wearing thing, at least in the United States, I don't know what the rhetoric is in Australia, but in the U.S., it's mostly just been a leadership failure. I think if the leadership had come out and explained that you're wearing masks to basically protect others, and that in essence it's an act of love to wear a mask, I think we would see a lot more compliance. And the other, the other thing is enforcing rules and having the expectation of enforcing rules. I live in the Northeast of the US, and the non-mask wearing group is much smaller here than it is in other parts of the country, primarily because we don't like our leadership, so we pretty much do the opposite of whatever they tell us. And as a result, everybody wears masks and is expected to wear masks, and you wouldn't go into a store without a mask. You wouldn't walk around in public. Before this talk, my wife and I took a walk around the neighborhood. We were completely outdoors. In the process, we passed probably 6 or 7 other people who were taking walks. And every time we did that, we would each move way out of each other's way so that we would not come close, and we would put on our masks as we got close to them. And it was seen as just common courtesy. It was, people don't go around walking naked either in, around here at least. And that's seen as common courtesy too. And you don't see anybody, yelling at store owners that wearing clothes is somehow suppressing their public speech rights. So it really is it really is a failure of leadership, I think. And if you have people telling you that masks are not important, if you have your role models basically telling you that the people who say wearing masks are a hoax, then you're going to have this kind of problem. So that's the issue. Not everything can be solved with an app.
Okay. Thank you.
Great answer there, Jared. And I like your analogy about comparing it to nakedness and people wearing clothes. Gold.
Yeah, there you go. It's basically, just common decency, really.
Yeah, totally. There's one more question here. What's your experience how organizations have anticipated needs? Is it often through user research? And if anyone wants to put their hand up for who asked that question, and I'll unmute you. Oh, Ash, no worries. There we go. Hey, Ash.
Hey,
Hi there.
Ash.
Hi, Jared. Just want to start by saying, big fan of yours. Been following you for years. Love your articles and your blogs and everything. So happy to chat with you.
You're the one. That's excellent.
Yeah. I'm just curious into your experience with this question, because I haven't had direct experience with it just recent yet, but been working in one organization where we were trying to innovate in the home improvement space, and competitors were, they already had the spaces nailed, but we found it difficult to work out how we can pull the customers away from them products to ours, and it was just very tricky. So just curious on your experience with this.
Yeah, the best way is through some form of user research. You may be lucky enough to work in a space where you are in your user group. Like developers make tools for developers. I could imagine people who are big home improvement nuts being the ones who want to create a better home improvement site, and so they use their own needs to create this. Frankly, the first version of the iPhone fell into this category where they basically built the phone that they wanted to have, right? And because they all used phones and they all knew what was bad about the phones they had, it was they didn't have to do a lot of additional research beyond looking at what they wanted or what their family members would want, and that was good enough. But when we work in businesses where the domain is not a product we use, it's not an industry we're aware of. You know, if I'm developing systems for oncology radiologists, I would need to learn what an oncology radiologist needs. I would need to know more about what their experience would be. And so this is a more difficult problem. And it's something where you need to do far more research, and you need to spend time sort of shadowing, and you can't just go up to people and ask them, what do you need? They may not know. And one of my favorite examples is we were studying this woman who ran her own business. She ran a beauty salon, and we were looking at how she was using the software to manage the salon. And she had already had the software that we were making, but we were trying to understand how she was using it and what we could do differently. And as part of the research, we were in her salon with her, and she's showing us a whole bunch of things. And she just offhand mentions that she's really proud of herself because she just figured out a way to make payroll much faster. So we started asking her about this, and it turns out that she got her payroll process down to 3.5 hours a week. And we were surprised by this because she doesn't have that many employees. She has 5 full-time employees and 5 people who rent stylist chairs from her. And so 3.5 hours seemed excessive to us, but she was really happy about it. And when we pressed her more on it, it turned out that she it used to take her 5 hours. So cutting out that 1.5 hours was a big deal for her. And so she could like do it in a Friday afternoon now, and it took much less of her time, and she was really happy with it. And so we had her walk us through what the 3.5 hour process was. And it was so crazy and so convoluted. And she had all these steps. She would export data from our software into Excel, and then she'd mangle it in Excel, and then she'd actually export it again into Microsoft Word, and she'd do some changes in Word, and then she'd print out a bunch of pages in Word so they could post them on the walls, and then she'd go back into Excel and she'd do more work, and she would send that off to her payroll service, and then she'd do some other thing to get into her bookkeeping system. And this took her 3.5 hours every week. And like I said, she thought this was great because it used to take 5 hours. And we're looking at this and we're completely shocked because when I compared notes with the developers after the session, they thought, yeah, it would take about 10 minutes tops. We could get this down to 10 minutes, everything she's doing down to 10 minutes. And we just needed to know all the steps. And it turns out that we could give her, if you take that difference of basically 3 hours a week and you multiply that times 52 weeks a year, we could give her basically 2.5 weeks of her year back. And at the same time that she's telling us that she's got this down to 3.5 hours, she's telling us how she has a 1.5-year-old at home who she would like to spend more time with. And we're thinking, we can give you more time with your 1.5-year-old, right? So she doesn't know she needs a 10-minute payroll process, but we could easily see that she needs a 10-minute payroll process. And the only way we could see that was by spending that time with her in the salon. And there's no way she would have ever told us. She would have never put it on a customer feature request. She would never put it on a survey. It would have never come up. And frankly, the 5 hours process probably would have never come up because she thought that was all her doing. And so once you start to spend time with your users, you walk away with a list of things that's pretty much endless. And you can go and start making massive improvements almost immediately.
Great, thanks.
Okay, who's next?
Let's see, we've got Pip next. I'll just unmute Pip. Let me see.
Hey, Pip.
And
Hi there.
oh, there she is. Great stuff.
Hello.
G'day.
Okay.
Yeah, my question's about the product roadmap. That really kind of resonated with me because we just had a chat with my team yesterday about what was promised versus what the developers reckon is going to happen. So I'm kind of wondering, with that product roadmap and replacing the feature releases with, the solving customer needs or problems, can you kind of replace maybe stage 3 and stage 4 of those feature releases with solving customer needs in 3 months that we're going to focus on that, and then in 4 months we're going to focus on solving customer problems? Or is it best to ditch the whole roadmap completely and start by solving customer problems, like in the next sprint or the next release? Does that make sense?
No, I think you can start, and I've done this successfully with teams. You can just start by taking the roadmap and sitting down with the team, sitting down with the product managers, and maybe even the sales force or whoever it is, however the roadmap becomes real, right? I mean, every organization makes their roadmaps differently. So however things get on the roadmap, get the people who put it on the roadmap in a room or in a Zoom, or however you're doing it these days, and get them there, and then just one by one go through the things on the roadmap and say, okay, if we do a fantastic job of this thing, whatever it is, data export, if we do a fantastic job in data export, how do we make someone's life better? Mm-hmm. And from that question, we can then get to, okay, what problem is it solving? And if I understand what problem it's solving, then I can then, with the development team, figure out one of many solutions that will solve it, right? Mm-hmm. But I need to understand the problem. So if we just start with how do we make someone's life better? And then why can't they do that today? What's in their way? That's the problem we have to solve. Mm-hmm. And from there, we can then say, okay, well, what are the solutions that get us there? And maybe I build a better way to get data into Excel, or maybe I build better reports. And with a little bit more research, we can probably figure out which one of those would be preferable to customers. Mm. Maybe I end up doing both, but that's a good thing to know, right? Better reports, getting things into Excel, they're both valuable in different ways, and they're going to make different customers happy.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. That's great.
Does that help?
Yeah, definitely.
What do you think of it?
So, yeah, so at the moment we've had our development team reduced from 5 when the product roadmap was created. I work in a museum, so our digital products have kind of expanded due to the nature of we can't open yet. So
right, yeah.
So our development team's gone from 5 developers to 2 because all of their contracts have ended because we couldn't open. So we've come to this point where it's also like, using our users are kind of two kind of audiences, like the organization, we're fixing kind of their problems, as well as creating these new features for whenever we have visitors again. So it's also kind of marrying who's more important to figure out like where we spend our time. So yeah, that's really interesting to me because for me, the products that we're promising the users, all of that stuff has already kind of gone out to media. So for me, it's trying to find that balance between, okay, this would be like nice to haves for the organization and nice to have for our new visitors when they arrive. So yeah, I think it'll be a bunch of people in a room together trying to figure that out as well.
Right. So another thing that I learned from Bruce McCarthy, who I mentioned in the video, was a formula for helping prioritize roadmaps. And the way the formula works here, I'm going to switch so you can see what I'm doing. The way the formula works is it's you can establish the priority by figuring out the value of a given item on the roadmap, divide that by the amount of effort, and then multiply that by the confidence that you have that you understand the real value in the real effort. And you can put values in terms of money if you want, or you could put it, how many members would this generate or to the museum, or how oops, I realized this is all out of focus. Hold on, let me fix that. How much savings would it save the staff or something like that, right? Or we could just put it on a scale of say, 1 to 4, where 4 is a lot of value and 1 is virtually no value. And it doesn't really matter which of these types of ways you figure out value, as long as for every item on the roadmap, you use the same way of doing it. And then effort is the same sort of thing. We could figure this out in terms of, well, we know how much the developer contracts cost, and we know how much they cost every week, and we know how many weeks this might take. So we could put it in terms of dollars. We could also put it in terms of some notion of time, or we could put it in terms of again, some sort of number where a 4 is a lot of time or effort and 1 is not. And again, it doesn't really matter what you do, just as long as you use the same one all the time. And then the question is confidence. And confidence we usually do on a scale of 0% to 100%, right? Which is basically 0 to 1. And so the easiest way to figure out confidence is to the nice thing is that an annual calendar has 52 weeks a year, which is basically 50 weeks a year. So you could easily just do something and say, okay, let's talk about value. How often would you be willing to bet that you say that this is a 4? Would you be willing to bet a whole year's of your salary on that being a 4? And if they say, no, I'm not that sure. Okay, well, how about half a year? How about a week? A week is 2%. So we would give this 1/50th. So we would say the confidence here is 2% for that. And maybe the for effort, it's also a week. So give that 2%. So we would say our overall confidence is equal to 4%. And so now we can multiply 0.04 times that formula, and we now have a number. And that priority, whichever one comes up highest, that's the one we do first. How's that for a trick?
I love it, Jared. It's being able to put a number to it to show its value.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is a simple formula that you can use that will get you something. So
yeah, and at least then you can benchmark and compare.
Okay.
Next
Great,
up,
Pip.
thanks for that, Pip, by the way, great questions. Next up we have Kelly. Let me unmute you.
Hey, Kelly.
Hello. Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Clodagh. Some hard questions coming your way. So my question was about, all right, so I work in IT, so concerns with ethics come about a lot, but relating to user experience, be it in IT services and products or even other experiences, I was just wondering if you and your team or even anyone else in this meeting has considered the following, that as UX gets better and better, and it has been, for some businesses. I'm thinking because of COVID, especially, small businesses are front of mind for me. And some UX, I suppose, might be a bit costly for a small business. That's one thing. And the second thing is that as I travel internationally, I notice that different cultures have different expectations. You know, the basic expectations, as you said, they evolve, but they also vary by culture. But even within the same country, some clients might become, let's say, fussier in some industries, maybe, if there are enough competitors doing a lot of investments in UX, people's expectations grow in that industry, and then the smaller companies might be less able to keep up. So I don't know if this is a question for me to ask of you UX designers or of the government and regulators, but have you come across any clear boundaries for each individual UX designer to consider when offering better UX, to consider, how will this impact competition in the market and even people's mindsets so that they don't become too fussy, if that makes sense? So it's a twofold question. From the value of your UX services, you can be impacting the affordability of UX to small business and the fussiness of the client. That's how I understand some of the UX potential of UX. So correct me where wrong. And yeah, any thoughts?
So a couple of thoughts come to mind. One is that all products have a user experience, whether there were UX people involved or not.
Yeah.
Right. But the odds of a product having a good user experience when there are no UX people involved is similar to the odds of having a good meal when nobody who knows how to cook is involved. And so the end result is that you have this notion of a good experience or an experience, but it's probably being compensated for in some other way. Let's take a small business like a local restaurant that's now doing takeaway service, right? They probably can't afford a lot of IT resources to put ordering online. And maybe before the pandemic, they never had to think about this, right? Taking a phone call for takeaway orders and serving people in the restaurant, or people coming in and ordering and then waiting and then taking it away. That all worked. But now online capabilities are important. So the problem is that if you don't have that capability, you pay for it in some other way. So just tonight, I got takeaway from a local restaurant, and they don't have online ordering. And I had to call them, and I had to wait because they were talking to someone else on the phone. And so I was sitting and waiting. And if I wasn't such a patient person, I might have hung up. And then when we were done ordering, she had to take my credit card over the phone, which leads to errors, which makes the call longer, which means other people are waiting or getting busy signals. And so there's a cost, and they're not taking as many orders as they could be taking at a time when they need as many orders as they can to just stay alive. And because of that, that's because they don't have the resources. Now, the reality is they probably can't afford someone to custom build, particularly because their overall revenue is probably at 10% of what it was before the pandemic. So they can't afford to do that. But because of the world that we live in right now, there are services they could hire. They could easily add to their website a third-party service that would let them import their menu and set it up and do it. And if the UX of that service is really good, it's a no-brainer for them to pay the $25 a month or 2% of the transaction cost or whatever it is that service takes for its commission to support that. And so a really good user experience might be not paid for directly by the restaurant owner, but paid for by the third-party service that then sells to the restaurant owner a good user experience. And so I don't see this as fuzzy clients and sort of the demise of business. I see, actually, if you look at the businesses that are doing the biggest business right now, the ones that are really thriving during this pandemic, it's the ones that figured out how to create a good experience for people in this situation, and we're ready to be able to do that and are just expanding that now. And so that's that is sending a signal that good user experience is worth investment, and companies and industries that hadn't thought about that before are now really seeing that happening. And we're now, for the first time, we're seeing on our end the demand for designers starting to go up again. It's not where it was in December, November of last year, but it is way better than it was 3 months ago. We're now seeing more jobs on the market, more people looking for help, and I think it's because there's a perception in the industry in general, in the commercial space, that user experience is how we're going to get through this. I mean, just think about Pip's question being in the museum, right? They're having to figure out how they provide a great user experience to a museum that can't have people in it. And museums are doing incredible things right now. Everything from having virtual tours online to my wife just bought she needed new masks to wear, COVID, masks to wear outside. And instead of buying them at the corner store, she bought them from our local museum. So she has artwork masks that were designed by the museum based on artworks in the museum, which they put up on their e-commerce site, which they have been improving since they did this. And that's how we supported the museum, was paying a lot of money for masks that had, Renaissance artists on it. There you go. You're welcome.
Thank you, Kelly. Great questions. Next up, I'm not sure who asked the next question. Do they want to turn on their camera? They could ask it directly. Is that yourself, Chris? Did you ask the next one on my team do UX tasks, but the mindset of focusing on problems, questions, assumptions, etc. is not there? Effective ways to change mindsets from the bottom up.
Sure. I'd love to know a little bit more about that question, if the person who asked it's still here and can turn on their camera. We might know who that might have been, but I can try to make a guess. I think by UX tasks, we're talking about creating wireframes or some sort of deliverables that are typical of user experience work. The key thing is to shift the focus from outputs to outcomes, right? So one of the traps that lots of teams fall into, and it's an easy trap to fall into, is to think in terms of outputs. How many wireframes can we get done in the next month? How many usability tests can we run? How many different features can we work on? And we think in terms of quantities, and we think in terms of having, churning out as many of these quantities as possible. And so I think that's possibly what's being meant by UX tasks. The way to deal with that is to look at any one of those quantities, any one of those things, and ask the question: if we do a fantastic job of this, how will we make someone's life better, right? How will we improve someone's life? And just keep asking that question. So if we're working on a feature, if we do this feature really well, how will we make somebody's life better? And if we can start getting an answer to that, we're now going to then ask, okay, well, why can't they do that today? Why can't they have that improvement in their life now? And that gives us a image of what the problem we're trying to solve is. And from there, we can start to say, is this the right way to solve this problem? A woman named Jen Cardello, who runs research at Fidelity Investments, she has this framing, which is you have to think in 3 stages. The first stage is, are we even solving the right problem? And then once you've established that you're solving the right problem, then you can ask the question, is this the right solution? And once you know it's the right solution, then you can ask, are we doing the solution right? Right? So most of UX work, when we talk about it in a reactive mode, is focused on whatever solution we've been told to build, are we doing it right? But in Jen's world, we don't start there. We start with, are we doing the right problem? And once we know we have the right problem, then we can focus on, is this the right solution? Are we doing it right? And that changes you from a reactive mode of working on user experience problems to a proactive mode and get you out ahead of the game. And so that's the key way that I would tackle that for whoever it was who asked that question.
Nice. Is there more stuff from Jen Cardello online? Would we find that online?
Yes. So there's a beautiful presentation that she gave at the Design Leadership Summit last year in Toronto. So if you just Google Jen Cardello, Cardello, Design Leadership Summit, you will find a YouTube video or a Vimeo, or it's some video. I don't know what platform, so I won't say it's YouTube. Some video that has her presentation, and it's absolutely charming and lovely and really smart.
Great. I'll share that link once I find it afterwards with the group here. We have another anonymous question. If anyone wants to turn on their camera, and I'll unmute them. It's, are there any new frontiers of UX, e.g. AR, and then that you are excited about? Was that yourself, Oliver? Sorry, I'll just unmute you.
Yes.
Ash found the video. Yes, that's the right one, Ash. I don't think of, I mean, I guess augmented reality is a new frontier. To me, that's these are the technology stuff doesn't interest me that much. I'm just old, I think, and I've seen, when I started in this business, I worked on the first personal computer product. So personal computers didn't exist. So the idea that we walk around with supercomputers in our pockets now, it's like, okay, that's great. But to me, the really interesting frontiers are around solving problems that in the world we've never been able to solve before. Working on ways to chip away at poverty, to chip away at inequity, to chip away at the inequalities in society that come from not having adequate health care, from not having adequate education, from children not having daycare. These are the things that I am most interested in. These are the things that excite me the most, because I see a lot of people working in these spaces doing some really interesting things. And many of these things are not technological solutions. They are system-wide solutions and working there. So to me, the really exciting frontiers are on solving some of these problems that we've never seen solutions for before, and really sort of understanding how we can move to a world where people are not want for basic services that should be delivered as human rights. And so that to me is much more exciting. And if we can do it with augmented reality, that's great. But if augmented reality never gets out of the gaming space, I could care less.
Has there been anything specific in these exciting kind of solutions, especially system-wide solutions? Have you found anything kind of in common with them, or are there some examples of really interesting kind of new solutions to old problems?
Yeah, yes. I think there's been a lot of work in research methods. So there's a basic problem of how do you do research in a way that allows you to uncover things that are basically class issues, right? So how do we, for instance, understand what it's like to be homeless? How do we understand what it's like to be in poverty? With the pandemic, we are finding out that our social service nets have some real weaknesses, that people are getting really clobbered. I mean, in the United States, victims of COVID are much more likely to be Black or brown people, right? And that's not because there's something fundamental in their biology that makes them more susceptible to the disease. It's because of societal things. They are more likely to be essential workers. They are more likely to not be able to afford to just sit in their house and hide for the pandemic. Basically, the lockdown is in the U.S. is middle class people hiding in their house while poverty level people deliver them things, and so they're out and about. They're getting exposed. They are less likely to be able to afford proper protection. They are taking public transit. They are in public spaces. They have, in the US, because of the stupid way we handle healthcare, they are less likely to have adequate healthcare. They are more likely to have diseases that make them susceptible, like diabetes. So there's all sorts of things, and it's basically because of class differences. It's basically because of inequities in society. And so just starting to do the research to understand how we can uncover these sort of systemic wide effects, and then from that, understanding how we might create new solutions that often involve the combination of some amount of technology, but also policy and service delivery. I mean, it is a shame that when people get really sick, they have to create some sort of GoFundMe type of service instead of having proper health coverage to pay for that. And so a friend of mine is doing research work for GoFundMe. And one of the things she's finding out is that, they had it in their head that they needed to find better ways to publicize their campaigns. When she talked to the people who were putting the campaigns, the number one thing they wanted was not to have to ask for the money in the first place. And so, why are we putting people in that position? And so this is these are the areas that I think are most interesting, because I think these are the ones, I could care less if we get a better set of goggles next month. What I want to know is how do I raise the quality of life of everybody in the US, or potentially everybody in the world. So that's what I'm interested in.
Thank you.
You're
Thanks
welcome.
for that, Jared. We're just coming up to 1 p.m. now. There is one more question. Can you squeeze in one more question for us?
Sure, I'm just hanging out here. It's long past 1 p.m. for me. Or technically, I have a long time until 1 p.m.
Here, this is from Pip. Pip, off you go.
Sorry, it's just a follow-up from the roadmap question.
Sure.
I'm a UX researcher, and I see a lot of similarities between that kind of new way of creating product roadmaps to UX, like research findings and recommendations after you've completed kind of a research period. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, if I've completed a round of UX research on a new experience in our museum, how, and this might be just like a really like dumb question, or I know there are no dumb questions, but simple solution, but I see those research findings being really similar to that product roadmap, and I guess working out those MVP. But I guess my question is, like, yeah, how do you see that the UX research findings influence that product roadmap in a kind of real way?
Well, it goes both ways, right? Your roadmap should influence your research,
Mm-hmm.
right? So ideally, you look ahead in the roadmap. You look at things that are not just the projects that are most prevalent right now, but you look at the things that are coming down the road, and you build in time. Because in research, the most expensive, the most valuable part of any research is the time you spend with a participant. And so if you can increase the time you spend with a participant by, say, 15 minutes, and in that extra 15 minutes, do a little bit of research on something that's down deep in the roadmap that you're not going to get to for a while, you can now start to build up smarts about that thing in the roadmap, so that when it finally becomes the current project, you actually know something about it and you're not starting from zero. And then similarly, you can then use what you're finding to help create confidence in that measurement of the value and the effort. Mm-hmm. Right? You can use that extra 15 minutes to find out actually how much more valuable it would be to that person you're talking to. And if you talk to enough people, you'll have a sense of, yeah, I kept asking people about this and no one could give me a reason why they cared, or everybody I talked to kept bringing this up. Mm-hmm. And you can start to use that information, so you now know value. And the more you know about what makes it valuable, the easier it will be to estimate effort, because you'll know what you need to build to deliver on that value, and you'll have more specifics. So suddenly your confidence goes up for that value and effort. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it's reciprocal. The more research you do, the more you learn about the things down the roadmap, the more you can actually know which things to prioritize first.
Awesome. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Pip. And Jared, massive thank you for your time and patience today and answering all those questions. And thanks again to Tung, who basically made this happen. Jared wouldn't be here otherwise. So thank you, Tung. Tung is a member and he's online here today as well. Jared, sorry for keeping you up so late. I think it's 10 p.m. over there, is it?
It is. But you know, as long as you can tell me that you know, the future, because you live in the future, is it's going to be a nice day tomorrow, then I will go to sleep confident and happy.
Well, you're in luck. It's a lovely day here, so there you go.
There you go. Well, then I'm looking forward to the future you're experiencing.
Jared, you're a star. Thank you so much. Guys, thanks everyone for joining. And just a quick call out for next session. It's November 5th and it's going to be Kirsten Mann and Tim Churchward. Tim is actually online here now. They both work for Oracle. One is the Global VP Product Experience and the other is Director of Design and User Experience at Oracle. That's the 5th of November. So we'll catch you all then again, hopefully. And Jared, once again, thank you. That was awesome. Cheers, guys.
Thank you for encouraging my behavior.
See you. Bye.
Bye.